Hey, today is April 27th. We are 24 hours out from the guilty verdict in the Bill Cosby rape trial. So I just wanted to touch base about this because this is extremely important. So, for those of you who've been living in, I don't know, under a rock, there has been a thing that's been going on and gaining traction for the last year or so called the Me Too movement. And the Me Too movement, for those of you who have been living under a rock, has everything to do with women who have been in situations where they have been sexually assaulted or coerced or bullied and sexually harassed above and beyond being cute and flirty and all sort of stuff. Like, this is really like unacceptable, like harassment and coercion and bullying and up to and including sexual assault. Um, and the thing about it is, historically, what happens when women are in these positions is it's never talked about. Like, nobody goes and it's too complicated. So we're not going to go, and start, oh my God, they're making me uncomfortable, because nobody wants to have this conversation because it's just awkward. And, people are going to blame us and not believe us anyway, right? So why go through all of that? But it happens, and it puts a lot of people in really bad positions, and oftentimes because victims aren't talking about it, they often feel like they're the only person who's gone through this. And the thing that's important to understand is that when it comes to sexual assault, okay, and rapists or sexual bullies, okay, these personalities are predatory personalities. So a couple of things you should know. One, statistically speaking, when we talk about like rapists as an example, like full on rape, the majority of rapes are committed by a minority of people, not minority race, but minority meaning a small number. Okay. So a small number of people are actually responsible for the majority of rapes that occur because they are serial rapists. What happens is once they're successful with a rape once, that becomes their MO, and they will do this over and over and over again with new victims. Okay. Until they get caught, and they can't do it anymore. And even then, sometimes once they've been charged, convicted, go to jail, come out, they go right back to it. Because it's part of their psychology. There's a predatory kind of personality that goes with this that gets off on hurting people like this. So there is that. The other thing is that, we have such a history of protecting men, from the evils of women. Ooh, the evils of women. And so that it literally has been historically always the woman's fault. Like, well, what were you wearing? What were you drinking? Why were you there? What were you doing? La, 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 la. All of these things have absolutely nothing to do with rapist mentality. Okay? Because if a rapist can rape an 84-year-old woman watching TV in her home, right? It's not because she was dressing sexy and wearing a mini skirt, okay? If somebody can rape a small child, it's not because the small child was sexually provocative and he just couldn't restrain himself. This is not what it's about, all right? So when we immediately go to, well, if you're being sexually harassed, you're being sexually coerced, and you're being sexually assaulted, well, what did you do to bring this on? What were you doing there? What were you wearing? Blah, blah, blah. What were you? What we're doing is we're making this the victim's fault. And the reality is it's the perpetrator's fault, because that's a predatory personality that wanted to do this and was going to do this no matter what that person was wearing, no matter what circumstances they were in. They were literally just looking for the right opportunity. Okay. The other thing you guys need to know is that statistically speaking, and this is the most frightening thing you're going to hear all day, statistically speaking, the majority of rapes are committed by people the victim knows. The whole fantasy about strangers jumping out of the bushes and the boogeyman jumping up from behind a car to rape you, like, that's a fantasy, literally a fantasy. Stranger on stranger rape is such a small number of actual cases that it's almost minuscule. The majority, like we're talking about almost all of them, of rapes occur by people the victim knows. Friends of the family, teachers, shopkeepers, caretakers, dates that you meet on Match.com, relatives. The majority of rapes are committed by people that the victim already knows and has a relationship with. So what happens is you have a predatory personality who is already instigated himself or found himself in a position of trust with this victim, and literally is just looking for an opportunity. And the problem is because they are someone the victim knows, it gets into this weird gray area because we're taught to believe that only bad people do this. It's that horrible boogeyman in the bushes. It couldn't be the nice guy, across the street. What? Our neighbor Joe? He would never do that. What? Bill? Why, he's a friend of the family. He would never rape my daughter. Okay, this actually happened to a friend of mine. What? Toby's her stepbrother. What? Mike's a fantastic history teacher. He would never do this to his students. Or with the female instructors, right? So the thing about it is we want to believe that the bad guy is always someone else, that we can spot the bad guy, right? And that the bad guy we would never be in a relationship of any type of amiable nature with a bad person. So clearly when Mr. Good Guy, Mr. Wholesome gets accused of something like this, it's a huge issue. Like, well, that's not right. That doesn't make any sense. How is that? No, that can't be right. It must be something she did, right? Clearly she must have, brought this on herself. That's the first instinct, because what we're trying to do is protect that guy. And we have a whole history in our culture and our society of making everything about the power partner, which in this case has historically been men, and women had no value. So of course, if we have to blame somebody, it's going to be the person we can dispose of the easiest, which is going to be the person who brings the least value to the table, which we believe is women. So that's where a lot of this comes from. And unfortunately, it's still perpetuated a lot these days. You'll hear it in the voices of men and women, right? Which is unfortunate. So the thing about it is, with this case, this is very important because on a social level, Bill Cosby represents Mr. American Dad. Like, he is literally, he's an icon. The man is literally the American dad. So for those of you who are too young to remember, there was a time back in the day, Mr. Jello, when Bill Cosby brought to American television a show called The Cosby Show. Now, what's important about this show is it was groundbreaking, absolutely groundbreaking. This literally made him an icon. Because prior to The Cosby Show, we did not have any representation of Black Americans that was not images of them being criminals or, thugs or uneducated or so ignorant. You're like, how in the hell did you tie your shoes this morning, right? So it was always negative, toxic images, right? And, very disempowering images when we saw them. And along comes Bill Cosby, and he's got this show about two very well-educated parents, both of them doctors, okay, in a middle-class family with, these wonderful children. And surprise, they're all Black, right? Complete departure from everything we'd been fed all these years. And what's important about this is that he did this show so well. Not only did he bring it to the networks and get them to put it on air, but once he put it on air, he did it so well, and the show was so convincing and so good and wholesome, and meaningful on so many levels that everybody from the entire social spectrum embraced this show. So literally there was a giant paradigm shift that occurred because of The Cosby Show and, Mr. American Dad, Bill Cosby himself. So he is a much loved icon. I love Bill Cosby. And even I struggle with my bias for him because when these charges first came out, I really did not want to believe that he would do something like this, because this is Bill Cosby, man. This is like Mr. Good Guy. You can't, no. And it literally, it wasn't until now that I finally just gave in and accepted that, yeah, he probably did this, and I've known the entire time that my resistance to accepting that has been because my bias for him is so strong that I don't want to believe that he could do these things. But of course he can do these things, because one of the things that we know is that rapists don't run around with signs on their head that says rapist, okay? Nobody runs around saying, hey, I'm a predatory personality and I'm going to jack your life up. It doesn't happen like that. They literally go out of their way to look as normal and trustworthy as possible. And they just wait for opportunities because they're jackals. They're spineless jackals that have to prey on the weak and the vulnerable, because they've got no strength or power any other way. So Bill Cosby in this particular case literally typifies this this schism between our biases for somebody or for the good guy, versus the reality of sometimes the good guy is also the bad guy. And rapists are not all boogeymen jumping out from bushes. Okay. So for people who are victims of sexual assault and for people who have loved ones who have been victims of sexual assault, this is not new. Like, this is not a new conversation for them. They know, we know. Okay. For people who've never been on that side of the coin, this is all probably new information for you. And it may even be hard to believe. And I strongly suggest you literally go start reading up on it because it's important. These are conversations we need to have, and this is all part of this Me Too movement as well, because these are situations that we find ourselves in that are not the classic boogeyman jumping out of the bushes and dragging you off to the side of the road to rape you, and yet these things are happening prolifically. Okay. And remember, the majority of rapes are done by a minority of people. So a small number of people are responsible for almost all of the rapes because they get away with it once. They keep doing it over and over and over again. So the same guy who goes to these parties and preys on these drunken girls, and forces himself on them is the same guy who will continue going to these parties and going on dates over and over and over and over again and doing the same thing. The same guy who is preying on the local teenage girls because he's friends with everybody's dad, right? Yeah, we've got one of those in my neighborhood too. He'll keep doing it. He will keep doing it. He will keep preying on the daughters and children of people that he knows that he has a trusted relationship with because he's got access, and they trust him, and nobody's ever going to believe her. Like, what, Joe would never do that. Teachers, classic example. Like, it's never just going to be one student. Once they've been successful getting away with this with one student, they will continue doing this with other students over and over and over again. One thing I got to give them credit for, they're not very imaginative. So these are the conversations that we are now going to have because of this rape case. Like, this is really, this case is going to be the face of, this is the face, of Mr. Good Guy, All American, and Mr. Creepy being the same person, and coming to the realization and the absolute understanding that the rapist we need to be concerned with is not a boogeyman in the bushes and a complete stranger to us. 9 out of 10 times it is somebody we know, that's either a friend or a friend of the family or somebody on a date with or somebody that we work with, somebody that we're in contact with all the time that we have established some type of trusting relationship with, because we have a culture that enables predatory personalities like that. We have a culture that wants to protect the power partner, which has historically been the man, and shift the blame to whoever is dispensable, which in this case is the woman, because women typically are not seen as bringing any value to the table. So we can get rid of her and just replace her with somebody else. So if somebody's got to be on the hook for this, let's make it her. What did you do? What were you wearing? Oh my gosh. And again, if you were a cunning, manipulative, predatory personality, would you go jump somebody and, getting into their car? Or would you wait until you had an opportunity where it was really questionable as to what happened, right? Where it was really easy to say, oh no, it wasn't like that. They're crazy, they're lying. And I can't begin to tell you how many mentally ill people get sexually assaulted on a far too frequent basis because their credibility, because they're mentally ill, is already compromised. And predatory personalities know that. Okay. It's just like retarded people or, mentally disabled. I don't know what the correct word is. Same thing. They are starting out with their credibility already compromised and low defenses, or weakened defenses, and predatory personalities spot that and go after that because they know that this all works to their advantage. Okay. So these are the things that we're talking about now as a result of this case. Now, astrologically, here's what's important about this case, right? Right. Yesterday, as this verdict came down, the July 2018 Cancer eclipse at 21 Cancer being activated. So that eclipse was being activated early, and Bill Cosby carries Sun, Mercury, and Pluto all in the late degrees of Cancer. Sun at 19, Mercury at 23, Pluto at 28. So this eclipse activation, the July eclipse sits on his sun. This is life-changing for him. And I don't think he's getting out of it. So I don't care what his lawyer says. And that that eclipse activation that set this up yesterday, like this is huge, huge. So the thing about it is eclipses typically are not about the little itty bitty parts of our personal lives. Eclipses typically are usually much larger and much more significant. And the fickle finger of fate, is dialing the phone, and letting you know who's calling this time. So in this case, because this absolutely involves his personal chart with his eclipse, he is going to be larger than life in terms of what he represents. Again, this kills me. I love Bill Cosby. This kills me. And this is all playing into the eclipse. Now, one of the things that I'm curious about with this eclipse is, Mercury and Uranus will head into those last degrees of Aries, which will square his Pluto. And Mars will, of course, oppose his Pluto and square that Mercury-Uranus before it changes over in mid-May. And I'm wondering, given the amount of stress and pressure that he is going to be under now, officially, if he's even going to make it to July. I really don't have a lot of high hope that he's going to make it past May. But because Mercury is involved, it is entirely possible that some form of document or communication or statement or some communique with him, for him, about him, through him could pop up that could be like the final swan song sort of thing, or something of significant importance that just kind of puts the final nail in the coffin. Although he's been charged guilty, I don't know that there is a final nail to put in this coffin, but some finishing thing on this opera I would look for right around mid-May when we get this transition going. So there's that. And the last thing I just want to leave you guys with very briefly is a discussion about Pluto. So one of the things you're going to hear, this is, oh my God, such a pet peeve, right? One of the things you're going to hear a lot from some, a lot of hack amateur astrologers. Picked up a book yesterday, suddenly they're an expert, or they've been doing it for 20 years. And now suddenly they still don't know what they're talking about. You'll hear a lot of talk about Mars-Pluto hard aspects being, the signature of rape. Oh, Mars-Pluto, rape! No. Full stop. No. So here's the thing. I want you to think about this for a second, right? So Pluto is a generational planet. I'm pretty sure it takes like 84 years or a little longer even for Pluto to change signs. So what this means is that when Mars and Pluto are in hard aspect, you're going to have entire generations of people that are going to share a Mars-Pluto aspect. And remember, we have billions of people on the planet at any given time, and only 10 planets in the solar system we use for a chart. That means that anytime we have a Mars-Pluto aspect, we literally have millions of people who are sharing that aspect, and entire generations of people who are sharing that aspect. So unless this person is saying that everybody born with a hard aspect between Mars and Pluto, this entire generation of people, these millions of people in this generation across the globe are running around raping each other, and being raped, rape, the entire generation. Ah! That doesn't make any sense. And the thing about it, and this is why this drives me nuts, when we make labels like this, which are very derogatory and damning labels based on, hodgepodge astrology, we're not doing anybody any favors. So you're going to have people who are going to hear this, like, oh my God. And now every time they see a Mars-Pluto hard aspect in somebody's chart, they're immediately, because this is the most memorable thing they can think of, they're going to go to rape. Oh my God, were you raped? Are you a rapist? First of all, one, if somebody was raped, it's none of your damn business. Second, I want to see you tell somebody that because they've got a hard Mars-Pluto aspect in chart that they're a potential rapist. Okay? Or I want you to explain to somebody why you won't go near them because you see a hard Mars-Pluto aspect in chart and you think they're a potential rapist. You go ahead and let me know how that works for you. Because the fact of the matter is, that's not enough. And Pluto represents a lot of things, which I'll cover in a separate video. But rape is not it. That's very kindergarten and it's very wrong. So if somebody steps to you about this business, and it's already happened at least once this morning, jumped into somebody's behind both feet about this. If somebody steps to you about this, well, everybody I've ever seen that's got Mars, Pluto, hard aspect, well, they've all clearly been rapists, blah, blah, blah. Oh dear God, what, all three people you know? Okay, so here's what you should be saying. Okay, well, if that's the case, can you provide for me um, the actual total number of people that you used for this study that were convicted of rape? And out of that total number of people that were convicted of rape, how many of these people did not have a hard Mars Pluto aspect? Which you'll find a few. And the other thing, remember that you're talking about people convicted of rape. These are people who are already of a criminal element or a criminal mind that were heading to jail and prison life anyway. This is not the same thing as the majority of rapists out there who never get charged for this stuff because date rape, friend rape, family friend rape. These are the rapes that never get reported, because how do I explain to somebody that I got raped at a party because I was drunk? Like I was drunk. Like, who's going to believe me? Right? How do you tell your family that the beloved family friend, just molested you when you're a 9-year-old girl? Right? This actually happened to a friend of mine, right? And how do you do that if they don't want to believe you? Okay? Who do you tell that your stepbrother, is raping your sister and is now trying to rape you? All right? How many incidences in the news have we seen where educators have gotten off, like literally walked away from rape charges without any punishment whatsoever, or practically none? And worse, because the student was clearly had a history of delinquency or some other, social emotional issues. They were made the reason that this happened. Clearly the teenager was out of control and seduced the instructor. Like, how many times have we seen this? Right? So when we see things like this, if it happens to us, who on earth do you think we're going to tell? Like, we just saw what they did to Susie and Bob. I'm not going through that. Like, Jesus, like, no, this was bad enough. I'm not making it worse. So when we talk about this Mars, Pluto, hard aspect and rapists, like, first of all, you're talking about convicted rapists. And that's a whole different animal, right? Than the non-convicted serial rapist, who's the date rapist, the family friend rapist, the stepbrother rapist, the educator rapist, okay? The person rapist, who represents the majority of people who actually commit these rapes. So, but by all means, make sure they give you that information, because if we're going to run around labeling people as rapists, or rape victims, I think it's important you actually have something more than, what is the word they like to use? Hyperbole, right? Exaggeration. When we're doing this, because these are damning, condemning statements. This is literally no better than accusing somebody of being a child molester, right? Because the labels stick even if the truth isn't there. So let's not do that. Let's not be irresponsible, and let's discourage other people from being irresponsible about this stuff, because I've had enough of this. I really have. So this is an interesting case, and this is significant in terms of social progress and social dynamics and paradigm shifts. If you've got something you want to add, please by all means add it in the comment section below. I will let you know now. If you have anything derogatory to say about the Me Too movement or rape victims, you are going to be put out like yesterday's trash, because you are trash. I won't tolerate it here. If you do not have any personal, actual experience with being a sexual assault survivor, or having to be the caretaker of somebody after a sexual assault, do not offer any opinion or positions on something without making it clear that this is your opinion or hypothesis or suspicion or speculation. Okay? And even then, you probably shouldn't. You should probably maybe, I don't know, keep your mouth shut and listen and learn. Okay? Because unless you've actually had a baby, you can't talk about the experience. You know nothing of what you speak. And for those of you who are victims of sexual assault, if any of this is triggering you, I'm sorry. And I'm sure many of you are not being triggered, but certainly, we know these conversations, right? Remember, there is the Rape and Incest Network online that you can reach out to for support and assistance. It's called RAINN, RAINN. And there are lots of good organizations locally that you can call if you need help or someone to talk to. And I strongly recommend that you give them a call if you need a sympathetic ear. And for those of you who are going to question my credibility and, who I am to have these opinions and stuff like that. So, I will just put this here, and we're going to end that conversation right now, because I will jump in your behind with both feet unapologetically and then ban you from my channel. I have been, and I will continue to be for the rest of my life, on and off, a sexual assault advocate, which means rape crisis counselor. Okay. I have friends. I have had entirely too many friends from childhood onward to today that have dealt with some of the most unbelievable situations of sexual assault by people they should have been able to trust. Literally family friends, stepbrothers, educators, neighbors, just the list goes on and on and on and on. None of these have been stranger on stranger rapes. And statistically speaking, now we know why. So this has very personal and deep meaning for me, okay? But I also know that as women, we can't run around looking at, even though statistically, nearly 99% of the rapes are committed by men, what we also cannot do is run around being completely paranoid that, because they're a man, ergo they must be a rapist. Mars, Pluto, oh, rape, man, rape. Like, we can't do that because we know that not all men are like this, okay? The problem is we have a society that creates an environment that makes it very easy for predatory personalities, to exist and to exploit these things to their advantage to the detriment of other people, not just their victims, but also the peers within which they stand, which would be other men. So it is time for us to stop looking for reasons why she, this, that, or the other thing. Because you wouldn't ask him, you wouldn't say to a man who's been raped by another man, so, Joe, what were you wearing? Like, why were you drinking in that bar? Like, you should know. Because here's the thing. The minute you start saying, what were you wearing? What were you drinking? What were you doing? What were you thinking? Why didn't you think ahead that this could happen? What you're really saying is all men are potential rapists, and you should have known that walking into this situation and prepared accordingly. Think about that for a second. So for some of us, we don't walk around being paranoid all the time, and we try not to, because we need to be able to function and we need to be able to see people for their better potential sides. But part of that also means believing the victim when they say that something happened, even if, like in this instance, it's who we thought and really want to believe is one of the good guys that turns out to actually maybe not be. So that's it, lovies. If you are a survivor, you have my love and support and, my sympathetic ear for what it's worth. But I strongly recommend, talking to somebody local and getting some help that way. And let's see how this plays out. This is a very important shift in our consciousness in terms of what we consider important enough to protect, and what defines safety and the value of women and home and hearth and children. So we are getting to a place where we're getting out of that old, rigid, unhealthy, toxic, masculine, protecting patriarchy and getting into a much healthier place for both genders. So keep your fingers crossed. We're getting there. All right. Bye.